So the uh, Republican Party's view on climate change um, seems to be sort of monolithically opposed to any action on the issue and very often denialists. But if you look at rank and file Republicans and their views on this issue, there is a sizable group who are very concerned about climate change. And I was shocked to see that even Fox News, which very often and even very recently peddles climate denial, but even Fox News asked a question about this. And so here's the clip.
Pretty short time frame here. Climate change. How will you? Amazing moment. Polls consistently show that young people's number one issue
Young
is climate
Americans
change.
for Liberty.
How will you, as both president of
This guy's from the group Young Americans for Liberty.
Polls consistently show that young people's number one issue is climate change. How will you, as both president of the United States and leader of the Republican Party, calm their fears that the Republican Party doesn't care about climate change?
So we want to start on this with a show of hands. Do you believe in human behavior is causing climate change? Raise your hand if you do.
Well, look, we're not school children. Let's have the debate. I mean, I'm happy to take it to start.
Okay.
So let me just say to Alexander this. First of all, one of the reasons our country's decline is because of the way the corporate media treats Republicans versus
Ron DeSantis is claiming mistreatment by Fox News.
Democrats. Biden was on the beach while those people were suffering. He was asked about it. He said, no comment. Are you kidding me? As somebody that's handled disasters in Florida, you got to be activated. You got to be there. You got to be present. You got to be helping people who are doing this. And here's the deal. So is that a yes? Is that a yes? Is that a hand raise?
You do not.
I think it was a hand raise for him, and my hands are in my pockets.
No, I'm raising hands.
Let us be honest as Republicans. I'm the only person on the stage who isn't bought and paid for, so I can say this. The climate change agenda is a hoax. The climate change agenda.
Look at that. Look at that. Isn't that incredible? Now, granted, they were largely booing because he was claiming that everyone else was bought and paid for, and the people in the audience were largely donors and so on. And many of them like other candidates. So, that's probably a big part of it. But,
the anti-carbon agenda is the wet blanket on our economy. And so the reality is more people are dying of bad climate change policies than they are of actual climate change.
So it's interesting. You look at some of the polling on this, for instance, and even among Republicans, 28% of Republicans consider climate change to be a major threat, and then 37% consider it a minor threat, and 33% believe that it is no threat at all. So the no threat at all position is a minority position in the party, but very often the minor threat and no threat at all groups coalesce together. So how do you reach the people who consider it a minor threat? And how do you reach the people who already consider it to be a major threat? And despite the fact that they consider it a major threat for a number of other reasons, because of other priorities on other issues, they ultimately remain with the GOP despite its fairly unanimous position against climate action, right? So I think that there are a few pieces in this, right? Part of it is that for the 65% of the Republican Party that thinks that climate change is real, according to this poll, and again, to varying degrees, right? There is still, especially with that 37% block, there is still a belief that the steps that we could take on this are going to be worse than the problem. Things Vivek said after claiming it was a hoax, he tried to reach other people who weren't quite on the page with that by saying that climate action is even worse than what we are told is the problem with climate change. And so there's this excellent video that talks about this, that talks about how many conservative leaders and public, I don't know if I would call Ben Shapiro a public intellectual of the conservative movement, but why these people are still so strongly opposed to climate action. And so it's an excellent video. I'll show you a certain part of it, and then I want to bring something else into the picture that any conservatives who might be watching this might find interesting. But first, let's just watch this clip.
I want to address all sides of the ideological spectrum for a moment and hope we can all agree on a few facts. Over the last 200 years, surely we can agree that coal and oil have taken the world from a patchwork of backward rural economies through the Industrial Revolution into the modern age. I used to work as a geologist on oil exploration rigs in the Mediterranean and the North Sea and helped find the fossil fuels that have given you and me all the comforts we now enjoy. Like it or not, that is the economic reality. But we also have to acknowledge the fact that burning these fuels has caused problems like pollution, bad health, and above all raised the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere to the point at which it's causing global warming. Like it or not, that's the scientific reality. We're led to believe that the two sides of this debate are those who say the only way to deal with anthropogenic climate change is to dismantle the capitalist system, and those who want to pretend it's all a hoax. I think the majority of sensible people would like to deal with the problem and support the free market system. Normally, I wouldn't tackle a subject like this, but I need to address the messages I get every time I make a video about science, suggesting that accepting science is an indication that I must be left-wing, as if all conservatives must be scientifically illiterate, or that science and capitalism are incompatible. So forgive me for spending a couple of videos on how climate science relates to the world of politics and economics. I'll put that away, this whole video is my opinion. But it's going to be an opinion based on facts, and as always, my sources are cited in the video description. I want to show why I think science, a healthy environment, and free enterprise are all essential elements of our democratic way of life. And I want you to meet some of the entrepreneurs and inventors I've met as a science reporter who are leading an energy revolution. But first, how did climate science suddenly become a political issue? After all, the link between carbon dioxide and temperature has been accepted by research scientists since it was first discovered in 1896 and confirmed in the 1940s. But the problem was largely confined to the scientific community until a visionary politician who really understood the science spoke out on the world stage and, for the first time, gave us this stark warning.
I spoke about the global threat of climate change. I set out the magnitude of the challenge we face. Until recently, we've always thought that whatever progress humanity makes, our planet would stay much the same. That may no longer be true. Next month, I shall be going to the United Nations to set out our view on how the world should tackle climate change. We've proposed a global convention, a sort of good conduct guide to the environment for all the world's nations on problems like the greenhouse effect. Britain has taken the lead internationally, and we shall continue to do so.
Yes, it was a staunch conservative, the Iron Lady herself, who gave a series of speeches on global warming 17 years before Al Gore turned it into a movie. To those who say Margaret Thatcher later rescinded her position, no, she didn't. She has a degree in analytical chemistry, so she was no dummy. She never contradicted the science. What she criticized was the way climate change was being used by a few extremists as an excuse to attack the capitalist system. The problem is that in the United States, powerful lobby groups have taken this to mean that anyone who accepts the science must therefore be a member of this nutty anti capitalist fringe group.
Okay, so um, Potholer 54 in many ways is a better messenger on this than I am, because what I get from his videos is that he really is basically a green Thatcherite, you know. And it's important to remember that green Thatcherite approaches are out there, you know, and even in the United States, we have groups like the Green Tea Party, and like I was showing you a few minutes ago, and the polling shows that there is a sizable minority in the Republican Party which considers climate change to be a serious threat. It's actually only it's only 5% fewer Republicans consider it to be a major threat than consider it to be no threat at all. So, you know, why should conservatives be concerned about this? Number one reason, which Potholer 54 talks about, is that there are a wide range of ways to address the problem, rooted in different ideological frameworks that have a different relation to markets and free enterprise and so on. There are some approaches that certainly are not as good for free enterprise. And there are some that are completely compatible with Margaret Thatcher's vision, Ronald Reagan's vision, or Michael Bloomberg's vision. Maybe not Ronald Reagan, I'm sorry. I meant to say Arnold Schwarzenegger, another Republican governor from California. But certainly Schwarzenegger, Thatcher, Bloomberg, a number of others who are on the center right, or even or further right than that, have been advocates for climate action and very, very staunchly supportive of the capitalist system. So there are some, like Jordan Peterson, who argue, you know, I don't know where the genuine ecological concern ends and an anti-capitalist foil begins. But I can tell you, unlike Potholer 54, you know, I do approach other economic issues with a great deal of concern about the current system. But I think it's important for people who are critical of capitalism to separate these things out. It's very tempting for us to say this is the result of capitalism. Climate change is the result of capitalism, and the only solution is a different economic system. And the problem with that is, however much you may want a different economic system, there are a few problems with it. One is that the likelihood of our building a new economic system before we deal with climate change and still having time to effectively deal with the issue of climate change is very slim. So yes, those of us who are genuinely concerned about climate change understand, however, whatever we may think of capitalism, we live in a capitalist system. And there must be a solution to this problem, which is compatible with the profit motive, if that solution is going to be implemented in a timely manner, right? Whatever we think about the profit motive. So that's a key point that I think even leftists, many leftists understand this, and I think that, you know, Naomi Klein view on this is dangerous because it gives unnecessary ammunition to the idea that you know, that we are trying to use climate concerns as a way to achieve other objectives. This is just an issue which is so urgent. We need as many people on board with the solution as possible, and we need to operate within existing institutions, whatever we think of them, because those are the institutions that are in a position to deal with this problem, right? So that's a key point. But then there's another point which was made to me, which really crystallizes why conservatives, some of whom do not believe the science, even if you don't believe the science, even the majority of American Republicans, and by the way, in most other countries, the center-right parties agree that climate change is real and are at least proposing certain climate actions. And the British Tory Party has a much better track record on this than the American Republican Party. But even among American Republicans, we're talking about 65% of people who think that it's some kind of threat, right? And so why should, especially this 37% group that's really holds a lot of sway over the party right now, because right now it's aligned with the people who don't think it's a problem at all, but they could, I think a lot of the people in that 37% might shift when they consider the political ramifications of climate change in the future. I'm not trying to sound condescending, like, oh, you haven't considered the political ramifications. You have. One political ramification that you might be seeing is, okay, a lot of people like Naomi Klein says this changes everything. And the only way we can deal with this issue is by just getting rid of capitalism. And despite the fact that there are the Margaret Thatchers out there and the Michael Bloombergs and so forth who are very pro-capitalist and pro-climate action, you're still seeing a lot of people who seem to think that the only solution to climate change is system change. And sure, we need to change our energy system, that's clear. Do we need to change our social and economic system? Now, again, as a leftist, I would argue that for a variety of other reasons, we should change our economic system. And how would I change it? I wouldn't change it to go to the Soviet model, which incidentally was not an ecologically friendly approach to organizing society at all, not remotely. In many ways, the Stalinist countries, the Leninists, Maoists, and so on countries were worse on that. But again, I think for other reasons, concerning other issues, that we should have economic democracy. We should have worker-owned, worker-run, not state-owned, not government-owned, not businesses. The workplaces should be owned and democratically managed by the people who work in them. That's my perspective for other reasons. Now, of course, the people in this 37% group do not share that perspective, and it's immaterial, because actually from your own standpoint, the things that you are concerned about, the impacts of climate change are going to impact the political landscape in the future. And the larger those climate impacts are, the larger the political impacts will be, right? So what Potholer 54 does is he talks about why conservatives can get behind a number of different solutions to the issue, which do not involve destroying capitalism, but which actually do involve harnessing capitalism and harnessing the profit motive to transition away from fossil fuels. And so that's an excellent video for that. And the flip side of the coin is that conservatives should be very concerned about where politics is going to go if climate change gets as bad as it could get if we do not take the actions that we need to be taking right now. So here's the thing. Even though I mentioned